The Ibis Ripmo AF can take an air shock or a coil, but which to choose? I've wanted to experience riding a coil shock for a really long time, and I had the opportunity this year riding the Ripmo AF. I ran the coil most of the year, but one thing that's cool about this bike is that because it also takes an air shock, it allows me the opportunity to test a coil and an air shock back to back on the same bike. In this video, I'm going to do a run on the air shock and on the coil, and I'm going to talk to you about the things I like and don't like about each. My hope is that if you're looking at this bike, it'll help you as you go through making your decision. And if you're new to bikes and just learning about different kinds of suspension, there'll be some great takeaways for you as well. I want to thank you so much for watching this video because it helps support this channel. I can't keep making these videos without your support. A few other things that you can do to help make videos like this possible is to subscribe to the channel if you're not already, watch my videos, give them likes. If you'd like to do a little bit more, you could also become a patron with a monthly pledge. You can also shop products from some of the Dusty Betty partners. Use the links in the description. Another thing you can do to help support Dusty Betty is visit the Dusty Betty shop and pick up some gear for yourself. I definitely get more support pedaling with the air shock, which I really love. You know, I think for a lot of riders where you need a lot of versatility out of your bike, an air shock makes a lot of sense. It is really fun going back to the progressive feel of an air shock too. So when we talk about a shock being progressive, talking about the fact that as you work into the suspension and compress the shock, that increases the pressure in the air chamber. So you get a little more pop and snap. It's a lot easier to pump. It's a lot easier to kind of get a quick up and over where you're compressing the shock and using that to help you go over. Really great for that. And that is probably one of my favorite things about the air shock, is that progressive feel. And it's true what they say, you know, you really can't beat the small bump compliance on a coil. But for most riding, it's not that big of a deal. You're not getting that much of a rough ride because you're on an air shock versus a coil. Especially one like the X2. You can adjust this to get a pretty dang plush ride. Another great thing about an air shock is that if you're making big adjustments that involve changing pressure to suit different kinds of riding you're doing, it's a lot easier to get this dialed in at the trailhead compared with a coil. A lot easier to adjust on the fly. Love that pump to play. I do love the way the DW Link is behaving with this air shock. Way more supportive when pedaling. shock really makes this bike a little bit livelier and a little more playful feeling. This is a really beefy and really nice shock. One thing that I love is that you can adjust high and low speed compression separately. Being able to adjust those separately is so nice, and it makes this bike a lot more versatile. Okay, so kind of to sum up what I think there is to love about the Air Shock, you get that progressive feel, which is amazing when you're pumping through and up and over things. You get a lot more support when you're climbing. You get really easy adjustability with pressure when you're on the go. Super easy to change that on the fly, very quick. Something you can easily do at a trailhead. I think for most riders, the Air Shock is probably going to be maximum versatility for you. And I think you're going to get a little more climbing performance out of it. So if you're doing the gnarly downhills and you want a bike like this, but it's still important to you to have a bike that can handle, you know, some technical climbs to get up there, I think that the Air Shock is probably gonna be your best way to go. All right, now it's time to do a run on the Coil. This is the DVO Jade X. I've got two springs for this, the 250 by 2.5. This is a 350. They recommend that you have two so that you can kind of adjust as you need to what riding you're doing. Yeah, anyway, let's do a pass, let's do a ride. It's pretty cool how smooth the Coil feels through the entire stroke. Even though I like more of a progressive feel, I can still definitely have some appreciation for the more linear feel of a Coil. Woo. I'm glad that I do have the two springs to try with this bike because, I mean, it's interesting. The larger Coil is a good idea when you're going to be taking bigger hits, but also it does give you a little more support in the climbs as well. But you're still not going to get that progressive pump feel that you get out of an Air Shock. Thanks, man. Have a good one. Now, I know everyone talks about the fact that Coils have much better small bump compliance, and that is true. An Air Shock is going to have seals, there's going to be some stiction, and it's not going to flow quite as buttery smooth. But don't freak out too much because it's not that big of a deal. I would say where a Coil shock will completely erase small bumps, an Air Shock smooths them out. So while you're a little bit aware that your bike is rolling over them, it's still smoothing them out and giving you a pretty dang cushy ride. A lot of fun you can have getting this dialed in just right for you. Like I said, it's a good idea to have a couple of coils to pull from. They also make spring clips that can reduce the stroke for you. So there's a lot you can do to adjust and fine tune it, get it just how you want it. I think the Coil is really what you want if you are racing enduro, or the kinds of rides that you're doing most of the time match that kind of profile where you have really technical, very fatiguing descents, but you still have to climb up the mountain to get there. If those climbs are kind of more moderate to low tech, sustained ones where it's really easy to take advantage of the lockouts, I think that's where this one really shines. I do think that it is going to be more difficult to tune this and adjust it on the fly, because sometimes it could involve things like, you know, changing your coil or whatever. Then they're not super involved. It's not as hard as you might think, but it's not as easy as just popping a little bit of air into your shock at the trailhead. Both great options, both have their strengths. Ultimately, I think the air shock probably has maximum versatility for most riders, but the coil definitely has its place, and it's great that you have the option of either one on this bike. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Would you go coil or air shock on a bike like this? Tell me what you like or don't like about each. It's really great hearing what you guys have to say, and I know it's a helpful resource for other people who are researching these kinds of topics. Thanks for watching. Get dusty.